Hello, wildlings. I'm your Creep Smith, and you found my Fear Forge. Lucky you. Welcome back, wildlings. Tonight's creepy classic, Have You Seen This Man? I'm not a dog person. This hasn't always been the case, though. As a matter of fact, I used to love dogs. I grew up telling everyone that I'd be a veterinarian one day. Had that been the case, I'd like to think that I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in now. I'm a nervous wreck. As long as I can remember, I have suffered from constant paranoia. Now, if you ask my parents, they'd tell you an entirely different story. According to them, I was calm, cool, and collected as a child. They say it wasn't until around the age of 12 when the way I carried myself drastically changed. I don't remember much from back then. However, there was a particular scene from my childhood that I'll never be able to push out of my mind. Something, or rather someone, that has shadowed me for the rest of my life. Remember how I said that I wasn't a dog person? Well, there's a reason for that. As I said, I told my parents that I wanted to be a veterinarian. They supported me. They wanted me to be successful. I take for granted how much they cared for me. They bought me books on animal anatomy. They took me to zoos. They bought me various VHS documentaries on animals. They tried their best to raise me into the adult that I wanted to be. An adult that my parents could be proud of. My birthday is in November. Now on this one I was turning 12. My previous attempts at asking my parents for a pet had always ended in an uneventful manner. Same thing. They would always say that I wasn't old enough or wasn't prepared for the responsibility of looking after a living, breathing being. I was set to prove them wrong. This year I was 12, damn it. I'd been reading up on all those animal books, and this year I knew I was ready. Once again, I told my parents that I wanted a pet this year. Their reaction was different this time. My father actually gave me a single-word answer. Maybe. And with that, I knew what I'd be getting for my birthday this year. I wasn't really surprised when I woke up the morning of my birthday to a small puppy licking my face. I was thrilled. There were my parents standing at my bedroom door, smiling warmly. They wished me happy birthday and gave me a speech about how I needed to treat that dog the way I would any other living being. They provided me with dog food, bowls, and a leash. And in that moment, I was the happiest that I'd ever been in my entire life. That dog was my best friend, and would continue to be. The time I spent with the little guy was great. I was an only child, homeschooled. I was never really able to have much interaction with other people my age. I didn't have a problem doing so. That's simply the way things turned out. My dog, who I had named Theo, had steadily grown a bond with me over the course of his first month living in our house. We bonded the way any other kid would with his dog. We went on walks, we played together, I bathed him, fed him, and overall tried to raise him the best I could, as my parents had done for me. Needless to say, my parents were impressed with their son. Their opinion of me soon changed. It was January 1st, the beginning of a new year, and a new beginning for me. Just not in the way I wanted. I woke up around 10 a.m., which at the time was a late start for me. I had never actually made it to midnight on New Year's before, and I felt like absolute shit. I was greeted in the kitchen by my mother, who had cooked us up a delicious breakfast. My mom's cooking was the stuff of legend. As I sat at the dining room table to eat breakfast, Theo greeted me from under the table and sat down at my feet, so I surreptitiously flipped him a piece of bacon. He was delighted. Then my breakfast was cut short. You see, one of my chores was to get the mail every day. As soon as I heard the familiar sound of the mail truck, I got up out of my chair. One of my animal documentaries had taught me about Ivan Pavlov and his dogs. Funny how I didn't know I was being conditioned to react a certain way to the sound of that truck until I saw that video. I was still tired from the last night, and I fumbled toward the door. Wasn't really paying that much attention. And as soon as I opened the door, Theo took off as fast as he could. I really wasn't processing what had just happened. He'd never done that before. I collected my thoughts and decided to go after him, so I grabbed my jacket from the coat rack and ran outside. As soon as I stepped on my porch, however, I froze. Theo hadn't gotten very far. He hadn't even left the front yard. The yard's exit was blocked by a man. And this was the first time I ever saw him. The man looked straight at me. He didn't blink, and I didn't know what to do or how to feel. At first I was grateful. He was the only thing standing between Theo and the rest of the world. He said nothing. Theo was looking up at him, wagging his tail, panting, but it was as if the man didn't notice that Theo was even there. He just kept staring at me. I wanted to say something, wanted to thank him. The way he was looking at me was as if he was expecting me to say something, but I couldn't bring myself to. Then, without even slightly averting his gaze, he knelt down and picked up Theo by the scruff of his neck. Poor little guy whined. I wanted to tell him to put my dog down, but again, I couldn't. I simply couldn't formulate the appropriate words. My mind was all in a jumble. I couldn't move, couldn't think straight. All I could do was watch. Then the man reached into his pocket, pulled out a knife, and cut Theo's throat in one quick motion. Blood spilled onto the snow-covered ground. He held my poor little friend in the air for a few seconds, letting Theo's blood form a puddle underneath him. And then the man simply let go. Theo fell with a light crunch onto the reddened snow, and again the man's gaze had never left my own. He dropped the knife to the ground and simply walked away. It wasn't until he was completely out of sight until I could move again. I made my way over to Theo's corpse and stood over him. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't shed a single tear. Then my mother emerged from the house, probably wondering why getting the mail was taking me so long. I don't blame her for screaming. She saw me standing over the mangled corpse of our little friend, knife on the ground. It didn't take a genius to put two and two together. The scene described itself. Shortly after that, my parents began forcing me to see a psychiatrist. When asked why I had killed Theo, I tried to tell him that it wasn't me. I had tried my best to tell him about the man. but I could tell he wasn't buying it. "All right," said the therapist with a smug tone. "Tell me what this man looked like." That's when I realized that I couldn't describe him. It's not that I didn't remember his face, it's just he was so generic that I wouldn't be able to describe him without also describing millions of other people. His face was so forgettable. I know I stared right at that man for a good 5 minutes. I remembered the face. One would assume that I would be able to remember the face of a man who had killed my best friend without breaking eye contact with me. It was like I knew what he looked like, but my brain couldn't translate that appearance into words. I didn't answer the therapist's question. I simply slumped into my chair. Afterwards, throughout my life, this man has popped up on multiple occasions. I could go into further detail in the future, but all I can say for right now is that he's real. This man definitely exists. I know, I seem crazy, but I know what I saw that day. And when I see the guy, it is always him. Whether he's among a crowd, sitting in a chair watching the news, or appearing in my dreams, he's real. And he's always watching. So stay scary, my wildlings, and make the most of your nights.